Do a little housekeeping because Zoom always puts the stuff right where I want it. So, hello everyone. I'm Jeremy Friesen. Pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a senior lead software engineer at Software Services by Scientist.com, aka SoftServe. I'll be talking about responsible and sustainable overrides today. So, in Samvera, those of us who've worked in it for a while know the stack is deep. If you're new to it, the stack is very deep. And we often need to make localized adjustments to extend existing behavior. So join me as we take a tour of some responsible ways to do this. I'm going to start with some marginalia. So when I was preparing for this conference, I came up with some code examples and how-tos, and I realized I got ahead of myself. So that the code is available on GitHub at jeremyf/responsible_overrides. But for this presentation, we're really not going to look there. Instead, we're going to take a different approach that could lead us to this code base. So first, what do I mean by an override? So typically, this is reopening the upstream class object and replacing, adding, removing functional logic in your local instance, making a change locally to something that is upstream. It can also mean copying and pasting the file into the same relative load path and letting Rails pick this new file. And I want to highlight that using overrides is a natural extension of our oft-invoked aphorism. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So understand when we override something, we are deviating from the anticipated path and are now forging on our own. So we are choosing to go faster, but also a loner. And lest we forget, I want to bring a quote from Milan Kundera's Slowness. There's a secret bond between slowness and memory, between speed and forgetting. In this talk, I want to provide some background and guidance for our override journey and to help us enter into memory and conversation on both process and approach. So, responsible approach. First, let's assume you know and you must make an override, you must make a change. I ask that we assess the options, work to contain the changes, and then document and share what we've done. Assessment. Before you begin your copy-paste journey, which is the easy way, look for places in the code where there might be creases that exist. So customizations, configurations, and other sundry items. First, take a look at the configuration files. Many of the gems that we include have a configuration file, a class, and they give a lot of information about what the project is about and how we collectively approach the software a little differently. So how do we run derivatives and things such as that? I want to look at the Hyrax configuration. This is code that I recently added to allow you to configure in your application and document the derivative services that Hyrax will run and test. So for purposes of this presentation, I've made some changes to the code so that it fits on the screen. In your application's initializer, that code that we just went through, you can add either the following. You can either replace it, or you can unshift or prepend it, or you can put it at the end of the code. This is the configuration. And I choose this because it helps on the second point of the assessment, which is class methods. So throughout Hyrax, you might see, or you may have encountered class attribute or matter accessor, which is module attribute accessor. The class attribute is something from Rails, and matter accessor, I believe, is from Ruby. And these are also points of configuration. I would call them advanced configuration points because they may not be, well, they're definitely not necessarily in the configuration file, and so you're going to have to get oriented to the code. But you're already there, doing the override. So take a look at what's in the neighborhood. Below, I want to touch back on the Hyrax derivative service. So I showed you the configuration in the previous slides, but in this slide, I'm showing you the actual Hyrax derivative service and how it has been adjusted to deprecate the previous means of overriding and make it more visible to use the Hyrax config. And I'm going to continue to the next page, which shows the actual derivative service as it reflects a change. Notice the services :hyrax.config.derivative services is a dependency injection, which allows us to more easily test and alter what the stack or what the derivative services are that we run. So the code inside the for method body is doing the lookup of these services. The present code in the released version of Hyrax looks like this. And this is where we have that class attribute services. Then we set the services array and do the similar logic. They're conceptually the same, these two slides, the services being injected or being called. And one example of this configuration that's been used is in Samvera Labs, the NewspaperWorks gem makes use of this configuration. So how do we override a class attribute? That one is, you can do it in the initializer for the gem you're including, or you can put it in the config.toPrepare section of your application. This ensures that everything is ready to go in your application, and this is the changes you want to make. There are many, many examples of class attributes. The myriad of presenter classes or builder classes that you see throughout the application. In Hyrax is one case. Blacklight, it has several of those with the default processor chain or the rendering pipeline operations. So again, consider making those changes in your configure application. The other sundry items, Hyrax has several places for this. Those of us who have worked in Hyrax for a while know the actor stack. That is envisioned as being configurable. What happens when can be adjusted. Another one is the transaction container, which is successor to the actor stack and defines what all happens when we perform a transaction in Hyrax, and it's also configurable. Likewise, we have the Hyrax publisher, which is here's where you can find documentation on the application-wide publisher or Hyrax pub sub interface. So what all can happen kind of behind the scenes. Not going to dive into that. We all experience enough tech with Michael's lovely talk. Containment. Let's talk about containment. Now that we've equipped ourselves to perform an assessment, we need to make sure that we're not creating too much future grief. Let's assume you don't find a suitable crease in the code and need to do something more drastic. You have two categories that I like to think of: views and not views. The reason why views are a little different is you need to understand the Rails load path. It contains a list of directories, and we walk through each directory in order. And then when you call the require function, that parameter, which is a path, partial path to a file, we check, does the element in the array plus the partial path exist as a file? If it does, use that, and we're done with the file. Rails uses that for views, along with some other things, but we won't go there. Anyhow, if you need to make a change to a view, you copy and you paste it into the same relative directory structure in your application. The challenge is any changes you make in that view will not be immediately, any changes made upstream will not be immediately available to you. In essence, you have copy, pasted, and cut your ability to receive the updates for that view. So be careful with view changes. Historically, those are the expensive changes to manage over time. Now, over to the not views. You have two primary options. You can copy the file, again, whole cloth, and put it into that place in the load path. Or you can use this prepend a module. And I go through those patterns in the repository link there. TLDR is leverage the Ruby module.prepend or module.class eval functions. There are plenty of examples, so I won't go into that there or here. Next is minimize the code you change. Measure twice, cut once. When you do a prepend, work to change the least amount of code as possible. All code you copy or adjust is a fork in the road, and you get to eat what's at the end of that fork every day of the week from here on out. So be careful. Think of others, because when you're making a change, it's likely others elsewhere may want this change. So write and refactor accordingly. Please look to reduce surprises in your code. Follow a consistent pattern for indicating those changes in your code base. Ask yourself, how will others know about this change? Consider the logical groupings. Override several files for a similar concept. Consider placing those in a single file. One example we have is creating custom slugs. So enable to look up files by a human readable text and have that be the URL involves a lot of work in the current Samvera. So we made the choice to put them all in a single module for the work that we've done for a few of our clients. But use these modules as a documentation strategy to help folks know what's being changed. Next up is to document. You have several things you want to consider. Your application and its maintainers, both you and those who are going to come after you, as well as other adopters that might be interested, and how you will track the drift between your local application and its upstream. Next, I encourage you to document how you document these. Write up a policy or procedure and make sure folks are aware of it. At SoftServe, all of our overrides end in _decorator.rb, and we document that work in this, I believe, public URL in the slide, how to override a method from a dependency without copying the entire file over. Also consider yours and ours future self. In your overrides, consider how you might use file names, method names, documentation, inline comments, commit messages, logging, anything, all of these tools that are in service of your future self and those future maintainers. And sharing is caring. Share the how and the why of your changes. File issues in the repository. Do lots of linking. Link to the pull requests on your repository in that issue. Create a fork of your changes to kind of demonstrate this. Submit a pull request upstream. Hop on the tech call. Present on it at a conference. Email it to the tech list. Jump on Slack. Share it so that we can remember it. Because the goal is to go together. Make it easy to stumble upon this information, this change. Make it easy for folks to say, yeah, I want this, and maybe we in Samvera can incorporate that into the core logic. So to reiterate, assess where you're going to make the change, contain the impact, document why and how. Your code will say what it's doing, but please document why and how. This is all in service of patrons, future selves, current colleagues, future colleagues, to help us cope with the antics of what we decided today and yesterday. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jeremy. Are there any questions? I would say I'm loving the dog photos, Jeremy.
Yes. So I'll read the last bit if there are no questions. We rescued several puppies and their mom for 3 months-ish in winter of 21 to 22. And it was a highlight of a dreary winter. So And all of the puppies pictured have their wonderful forever homes.
I was wondering if they're all from your house. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Are there any? I'm trying to see if there's any hands up. For some reason I can't seem to find that, but I'm guessing there aren't.
So
All
to,
right.
to be clear, we are not hosting, we do not have all of the puppies. Orlando, Mookie, and Gambit are elsewhere. Lacey and Ollie, who are pictured in the here. The black and white is Lacey, and Ollie is the white and gray and brown.
All right. Oh, actually, do have a question really quick, and that is, how do you recommend handling testing of overrides?
Yeah, Thomas, I recommend that you write up your tests locally and really be clear what it was you were overriding. You may want to say, have a test that demonstrates the behavior that is no longer there or that is now there. Both of those are important. In some instances, I have added a raise clause. So like if this test was for a Hyrax version 3.4.1, I might add a raise clause that said, if the Hyrax version is not 3.4.1, raise an exception. And now that and say what the exception is and where to go look to see if things have changed. Because you need to be tracking what upstream and downstream, or what your local and upstream are all doing. But yeah, write your tests in your app. And look to the also look to the prior art of the tests from where you're overriding from. They may have guidance on how to do that.
All right, and then we have another question that is like, what would the refactoring, or would refactoring benefit the group more so?
Typically, it will benefit, and the thing about most of the overrides is they get to a point where you can if you make smaller methods and methods that have a command query separation concern, it starts to get easier to make those overrides. So yes, a refactor usually does help the group, and in your local instance, you are the best equipped to figure out how that refactor would work. So take a little time to do that. And if you ever need help, please ping me on Slack. I love refactoring code.
Yes.
I love refactoring Ruby code.
Okay. Thanks for that qualification. Oh, and one other question. Can you elaborate on the advantages of prepared module method?
Of the prepend?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, prepend. So prepend will, you can use the long-standing include module directive, but prepend basically puts it at the beginning of the evaluation chain, so that when your override is running, you get access to super, the function call, in a predictable way. So you don't truly break it's almost like extending the class in object-oriented mindset of extending something without having to create a whole new class.